In this video, I'm going to use JavaScript to create a hex sign in SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, and we see the results here. And let's get on to the code. Okay, so here's the HTML page, in which I have it, a title, I have some style, centered. This was from a previous page I'm not using. I have a parameter defined in the style, which is 300 pixels, which is sort of half the unit. And then I'm making my width and height twice that and scaling the SVG element in that way. So 600 by 600. On the body, here's my header, here is my SVG, it's empty, and everything else is code that's going to fill it. Okay. So I have some variables defined here. The 6 is going to be sort of this center, the hearts and the sort of flower shape. There are 6. And then I have the 30, so that there are 30 of these. This is 1/6 that we know, so sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them within the 6, so all the way around 30. We could change that if we wanted. Okay. And these are some fractions. The outer fraction is how big the sort of outer circle is within the whole SVG element. And then this fraction is more related to this sort of inner circle. And I'm not really drawing that inner circle. In fact, it's more of a 30-sided polygon or something. But this radii of, I am using this radii of these sort of flower petals, and that is this 0.65 compared, and I multiply it by my reference M. Okay. And here I am getting, speaking of M, I am getting the M, which is the JavaScript version of that half size parameter that was established in the style. I'm making an overall circle. This is the big circle centered at MM. That's my center. Frac 1 times M is the radius. As we said, its fill is dark red. I do have a stroke on it. I probably don't want that stroke, but I did have a stroke. And a stroke width of 2, and added it to my image. Now I'm looping over 6 times, and I have this loop twice because I added the hearts later on. But so here's my loop over num1, so over 6 things. I'm getting an angle. I am taking my 2 pi, my full time around the circle, and dividing it by num, so that's pretty much 360 divided by 6 is sort of 60 degrees, and multiplying it by I. And then I wanted to start, my starting angle is sort of a horizontal angle typically, and I wanted to start at the top. And so that was this pi on 2 business here. So I'm subtracting minus pi on 2 so that my sort of, as I start, I'm starting at the vertical. And then I'm going to create a path, and I'm in a loop, so I'm going to create 6 paths when I'm done. And actually I have 2 paths in here, so I'm going to create altogether 12 paths. And I have my starting point is M is the center horizontally, and then I'm going out from the center M times frac 2, so that is this sort of inner circle times math of cosine of that angle. And then for my y, the same thing, but cosine instead of cosine. And then I am, so that is a starting point. So that is a point on the outer edge of the inner circle. Okay. So say I'm like here. And then I'm going to make an arc that has that frac 2m. That's going to be a sort of a radius of a circle of an arc, and arcs in general are ellipses. So I have that the two radii are the same. Um, um, this first parameter here is about rotating, but I have circular arcs, so the rotation doesn't matter. In the other two parameters, I typically have to play with sort of just experiment with to get right. And then I'm going to the center, MN. So that's sort of making me sort of one of these up here. And I make a path. All that thing I was making was the D. The M is my starting point. The A is that it's an arc. Here are the radii. Here are these parameters. Here's my ending point of my arc. And I filled it in with yellow with no stroke and added it. This one is pretty much the same, except one of those parameters is different. So I'm sort of grabbing the other side of the arc. So one of them is this and the other one is that. Then I wanted that sort of gap in there. And so I made a line that went from the center MM to the outer edge, the same M plus M frac. So it's going to that same point, but now with a line, and that had a stroke of dark red and some width. So that was then these lines. Okay, so that's the sort of petal shaped and the lines. Okay, and I probably could have made these one big path instead of two paths. Okay, and then I had my lines, and now I'm on to this is my second loop, and my second loop is over num2, which I have at 30. So that's me making these like 30 sort of semicircles out here. And once again, getting the angle. So I divide my 2 pi divided by num2 this time and multiply by I. And again, this is sort of 90, subtracting sort of 90 degrees or pi on 2. And that's because I want to sort of start at the vertical. And then I am making a, so that's where I am starting. And I am adding an extra to my theta. Probably just should have added this up here, but I'm adding an extra Math.pi divided by num2. That's what I was looking for up here, but I see that I have it here. And that is that extra little bit of rotation. Then I'm not starting my semicircle at that same point, but my semicircle is centered there. So I have an extra little plus and minus of that angle. So here, so theta is sort of here in, angular wise, theta is here, and then I'm going to subtract a little bit and add a little bit to it to find my 2 points. So here's my theta plus, that's my starting point of this path. It is again another arc, and this is the radius of that arc. I am taking my m, my sort of regular size, and frac 2. That is this radius of this sort of inner circle. I'm multiplying it by pi. So that's sort of my circumference for the most part. Actually, half a circumference. It's pi times and then I'm dividing it by num. So I'm sort of taking my circumference, dividing it by 20. That would be sort of a diameter, and then I'm getting rid of that too. So because I want a radius. So here's a radius, and here it is again, another radius. For some reason I decided to parse it there. I'm not sure why. And then these parameters, don't worry about rotation, 0, 0. And then here's my ending point. And whereas up here, I added that extra little fraction of pi. Here I added it, here I subtracted it, and that got me to sort of either side. So my theta is this sort of the middle, and then I add and subtract in my path. Add the path, add the D attribute of the path, fill it in with yellow, no stroke, and that is all these little semicircles. I chose 30 of them. And then I decided to add these hearts. And I had previously made some hearts, just one like great big heart, and I decided to make my heart out of arcs. So I'm not going to explain the heart in detail because I did that in a previous video. But here was that code for a heart, and there was some starting point, which was the sort of this sort of part of the heart, this like where the top parts come down. That is this starting point. And so I took this code sort of from here to here and made a heart, and I sort of pasted it over here. I made my starting point 0 and 0. I scaled down the radius. That's not going to be enough. I have another place where I can scale it down, and I will show that to you. But here is this code for making a heart. I centered it at 0, 0, and pull down the radius a bit, and I'm going to pull it down in another way as well. Okay. So what I've done, first thing is, and again, this is a loop over 6. I am creating a G element, which is a container. And then I have made my heart path out of arcs. And then I am adding to my container, I'm adding the heart path. So I made a container, I'm making it in code, so it's empty. And then I have added my path, which is the path for a heart. Okay, so now I have, and then eventually I add the container with the heart to the hex sign. Okay, so now we see that I've got hearts being added to my container, and I add my heart to my container and my container to my hex sign. So I have added the hearts, and I'm in a loop, so I've done it 6 times. And then I've got to position the hearts where I want them and also get the right rotation and scale. So I have, just before I add the G container, I am giving the G container a transform attribute, and that I'm going to translate, rotate, and scale it. The scale is the easy one. That's to make the hearts small enough to fit within the sign. I have this sort of rotational angle, sort of similar to what I had above for the petals, but I'm sort of going another sort of partial rotation on each of these to be sort of in that inner space. So that's this half. So up above in that first loop, you would see 2 pi divided by num times I. I've added in an extra half to get me in that sort of in-between area. And this minus pi on 2 is, again, that I'm sort of starting at the vertical, and then I'm sort of coming in, going around every 60 degrees, but I have this extra half, so I'm sort of starting at sort of 30 degrees. So I started 30 degrees from the vertical and sort of filled in. So that is this rotational angle. I get from the center sort of a certain amount of x. Here is some fraction, 3/4 to sort of, and that I needed to play with to get the sort of hearts where I wanted them sort of along the radii. So that was a little bit of playing. And then and so that was the X and the Y for my translate. And then I needed to rotate them. And I didn't want this pi compared to the translate, the angle I'm using in translate and the angle I'm using to rotate. They were different. You know, I had to take away this pi on 2 to get my angle right. So there it is. I have this sort of template literal, and a transform can have a number of things. It has a translate where I'm putting in the variables x and y. It has a rotate where I have rotating around an angle. The angle in rotate, when I'm calculating doing my sort of my x's and y's for my translate, I use the angles in radians, but this rotate wants angles in degrees. So that's here, I'm multiplying by 180 and dividing by pi. That converts it into degrees. It says convert to angle. That makes no sense. Convert angle to degrees. That makes more sense. And put that in. So this $sign curly bracket that allows you to put a variable inside a template literal. And so I'm in a loop. I am making a container. I'm putting my heart in a container. And then I am translating, rotating, and scaling those containers and then adding them to my sign. They're my little hearts. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you on this one. Thanks for your attention.